Happy Friday. I'm not going to waste your time today. We have some week 5 start-sit options. If you don't see your player on today's video, drop an additional question in the comments. I will answer each and every comment as quickly as possible. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. It's Owen. Let's start off with a quick little recap. Starting off here with our week 4 recap, of course, this is a combination of players from last Thursday's video, as well as exclusive players I released on my Instagram account. But overall last week, we had, an okay week, definitely our worst week so far. But guys like Russ, Dak, and Kamara, we were completely right on, as well as Romeo Dubs on Thursday night, which is an Instagram exclusive, as well as Cade Otton, which is an odd one. But we kind of threw it out there, and we hit on that one. So, there's also some yellow guys here with Calvin Ridley, Brian Robinson, and Zach Moss. They all had okay weeks. I can see both sides of the coin. You can say I hit. You can say I didn't. Either or doesn't really matter. And we also have some guys we missed on, like DJ Moore, Tank Dell, and David Njoku even, if you want to make that argument. But that is going to do it. We're not going to count Javonte Williams. Overall, we had a pretty good week. 5 correct, 3 shakies, and 3 wrongs. But we're going to get back on track here. Because at the quarterback position, we're going to start with Kirk Cousins. And he's coming off of his worst game of the year. And let me explain here in a week. But this week, it's a battle of the next Netflix quarterbacks. But even with that said, Cousins still threw multiple touchdown passes for a 4th straight week last week. And let me further clarify by saying his worst game this year, that just means he didn't throw for 340 plus yards like he did for the first couple weeks of the season. Kirk this week will be at his best when he is, at least fantasy-wise, when he is in catch-up mode, when he's trailing. And I think that is a likely scenario, saying that they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs, they've been a tough matchup for quarterbacks all season. But Cousins, I think he just has too many options around him with Jefferson, Madison, Hockenson, and I'm missing one there. But he has too many options around him that even if this game does get out of hand early, I think in catch-up mode is when the Vikings are at their best. And Cousins has a lot of weapons to be fantasy relevant yet again this week against a tough Kansas City Chiefs defense. Who knows? That could be the highest scoring matchup of the week. Start Kirk Cousins. Joe Burrow, on the other hand, we're going to sit, as he's clearly not the same quarterback with that calf/ankle injury. And this is a case where playing through an injury as a star player is more hurtful to your team, more so than helping it on a weekly basis. As Joe Burrow had just scored 4.5 points last week for fantasy, despite the favorable matchup on paper against Tennessee. He's only averaging about 8 fantasy points per game throughout the first month of the year. So you can tell something is not right with Joe Burrow. I mean, he's failed to throw a touchdown in 3 of his first 4 games. I love the player. I've been one of the biggest advocates for him to say that he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. But we cannot keep starting him in fantasy football. And again, the Cardinals aren't a tough matchup. They don't even want to win games right now, as Caleb Williams is slipping out of their fingertips with the Bears and how bad they are. But until Joe Burrow looks like Joe Burrow, and this is just a safe play here, I would sit him until he proves to us that he's fully back to the level that we know Joe Burrow can play at. Moving over to the running back position, this is the biggest question I got throughout the week. And I'm going to put this very simply for the Indy backfield. As, look, we'll say this. Zach Moss, he's been great in the absence of Jonathan Taylor. He's making the most of his opportunity, and I hope that this couple-week stretch will extend his career, because we know running backs don't have the largest shelf life in the league. And with this opportunity, and he's looked great in it, hopefully it extends his career to at least to another contract or so. But simply put, Jonathan Taylor, if he's returning to football this week, he's that dude. Okay, let's not forget the type of player Jonathan Taylor is. Some would argue he's the best back in the league. If he is available this week in this run-heavy offense, he's a must-start. I'll put it that way. Unless there's a report that comes out and says that he's on a snap count this week, which in that case I would sit Taylor and start Zach Moss, then you start Jonathan Taylor if he's ready to play football, and you sit Zach Moss if Jonathan Taylor's a full 100% go, which he should be because he's been staying in shape and he's ready for the field. He just, of course, got into a dispute with the owner. Ramondre Stevenson, on the other hand, look, unfortunately, he hasn't lived up to the expectations that many set for him coming into this year, as he's yet to run for 60-plus yards in a game this season. He's scored fewer than 8 fantasy points the last 2 weeks of fantasy football. He's been a week killer, is a way to say it. and he hasn't had more than 10 receiving yards in a game since week 1. This week he faces a tough Saints defense who has allowed the 8th fewest rushing yards to running backs, and they have yet to allow a rushing touchdown, of course, this season. If you have another running back option you like on your bench, maybe a guy like Zach Moss, let's say if Jonathan Taylor isn't playing, I would start Zach Moss over a guy like Ramondre Stevenson this week. And Ramondre's kind of like Burrow, in my opinion. I like the player, but he hasn't been himself. So until he proves to us that he's back to that version that we know he can be at, I would sit him in a safe play. As again, even if he goes off on your bench, that's okay. We made the smarter decision, which was to sit Ramondre until he gets back to where we know he can play at. Miles Sanders, on the other hand, we're also going to sit as he's still rehabbing from that hip/groin injury. And Sanders only managed 19 rushing yards and 13 yards through the air last week as he tried to play through an injury. Of course, that's never a good decision. But it's been an up and down start to the year for Miles Sanders, especially after that career year in Philly. But now this week, it's not going to get easier. He's facing a dominant Lions defense, which has locked up the running back position this year, to say the least. But due to the inconsistent play of Miles Sanders this year, his injury, and that the fact that he's playing a top 5 level defense, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to sit Miles Sanders this week if you can, if you have other options on the bench. At the wide receiver position, we're going to start here with Tank Dell, and I'll be honest, you saw earlier as we did the recap, I was wrong about Tank Dell last week, but I'm going to double down on my take this week. I'm going to start him against the Atlanta Falcons, given the cornerback matchups, and let me explain. As the Texans, they're young, they're fun, and they're high-powered. But this week, they're playing an Atlanta team that plays a completely different style of football. But for the strict matchup of the Texans offense versus the Falcons defense, they have a good cornerback room. They have a good secondary. But most notably, they have A.J. Terrell, an all-pro level corner, a guy who held Calvin Ridley in their matchup last week to 1 reception for 8 total yards. Let's not forget that Calvin Ridley's 30-yard touchdown came against a different corner. So A.J. Terrell locked up Calvin Ridley last week, and he should do the same to Nico Collins this week. So with that being said, the Tank Dell is going to be the number 2 option, and if Nico Collins is shut out of the game due to the star power of A.J. Terrell, Tank Dell should go off this week, and he should get back on track to where he was to the beginning of the season. Courtland Sutton, on the other hand, we're going to sit as he's proven to be a safe floor wide receiver this year, as he's not winning you your weeks, aside from I think 2 weeks ago, but he's also not losing your weeks, is a good way to put it. It's kind of like what we expected from him last season. Of course, that's not how it played out, but this week he matches up against maybe the best cornerback in the NFL in Sauce Gardner, and if he isn't matched up against Sauce Gardner, he's going to be matched up with DJ Reed, a very underrated Pro Bowl level corner. So it's going to be a very tough week for Courtland Sutton to be fantasy relevant, is a good way to put it. But that pairing, that Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed pairing as a cornerback duo, they've allowed the 5th fewest yards to the wide receiver position and just 1 touchdown this season. And that is against teams like the Bills, who have elite receivers, against the Cowboys, who have an elite receiver, and the Chiefs, who just have an overall creative offense with a bunch of different relevant wide receivers. So again, I like the player Courtland Sutton, but given his matchup against the cornerbacks there for the Jets, I would sit him this week as a safe play, is a sit him. But again, if you have to play him, I'm sure it's not going to be the worst option in the world. Moving over to a Sunday night matchup here, no doubt the game of the week. It's a matchup between 2 top 5 level teams in the 49ers and the Cowboys. Big matchup for both teams here. But I have 2 different starts in this game, and they're not going to come as a shocker. But again, these are questions that I get over on Instagram. So if you want to be featured in these videos, go ahead to my Instagram. I drop a poll each and every week, and you guys just drop a player in there, and I bring them to the Friday videos. But Brandon Aiyuk and Jake Ferguson, I'm going to use them as a combo here because it's relatively simple to me. Brandon Aiyuk came back from his injury last week, okay? And if there was any doubt before, there's no doubt now that he's the number 1 wide receiver there in San Francisco, as Deebo Samuel had 3 carries for 6 yards last week. Again, as a wide receiver, he had 0 targets. Brandon Aiyuk should kill it again against a tough Dallas defense, and I have a hot take here for you in a second. But Jake Ferguson, on the other hand, he's been maybe the most consistent tight end this season. Consistent 10-plus point games, and he's led the league in red zone targets for the tight end position this year. That's always good for us fantasy players, of course. But this is one of those predictions that I hit on before the season. I had Jake Ferguson as a top 12 tight end coming into the year, and I told you guys to draft him in the last rounds of your drafts. So if you listen to me, well, right now you have a tight end 1 on your team. Dak produces tight end 1s, and his consistent volume throughout the season so far is just too hard to bench at this point in the season. Of course, unless you have a guy like Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce on your hands. Regardless, even against a tough Niners defense, I'm going to start Jake Ferguson, as if there was anybody on this Cowboys offense to find the end zone, I think it would be Jake Ferguson. But I have a hot take here for you guys. I think both of these guys will have 2+ touchdowns in this game. I think Ayuk and Ferguson, both of those guys will have 2 touchdowns in this matchup, and they're going to be league winners on Sunday night. But that is going to do it for my predictions, at least for the Sunday night game. The last one I have here is Dallas Goedert, and this might get me in some hot water. But in my opinion, start Dallas Goedert this week against the Rams, as there couldn't be a worse start to the year for a guy like Dallas Goedert, as he's the current tight end 29 on the year, only averaging about 5.5 points. And just for reference, that's worse than Kyle Pitts. And look, I'm a Gators fan. Go Gators. Love Kyle Pitts. Might be the greatest tight end I've ever seen play. But he's not an NFL relevant tight end, at least not for fantasy football. But for Dallas Goedert this week, he's playing the Rams. The Rams have allowed the 11th most receiving yards to tight ends this season. And additionally to that, Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni said in a press conference this past week that they're going to be looking to get Goedert the ball more so down the field than he has all season. And they want him to be more involved with the offense and getting more touches. So again, it's a very risky play. But let's say you had David Njoku and he's off this week and you need a tight end. I would start Dallas Goedert this week. And I'm viewing this basically as a last chance for Dallas Goedert. As if he messes this one up and he comes out with another dud, he might even find himself on the waiver wire with how he's played this year. But this is his last chance to start. And then again, if you don't want to believe me on this one, you don't want to trust me on this one, I understand. But Dallas Goedert's definitely a start option for me just one more time this year. That is going to do it for today's video. Again, if you want to be involved in these Friday videos, if you want to get a player involved in these videos, go over to my Instagram. Every single week I drop a poll. If you want to drop a player in that poll, I'll bring it to Friday's videos. And then on the other hand, if you didn't see your player in today's video that you're stuck on this weekend, drop a comment down below. I answer each and every comment as quick as I possibly can. So if you're like, hey, should I start player A or player B? Again, I'm not a genius. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I'll give you my opinion on it. And of course, we can always discuss what is the best option for our fantasy lineups this weekend. But again, that's going to do it for today's video. I'll see you guys next Tuesday for another great week of videos. The 1 year for this channel is coming up next week, so that's exciting. But good luck to your real life teams. Good luck to your fantasy teams this weekend, because if you started hot, you need to stay hot. And if you started off bad or mediocre, you need to get back on the right track and make that playoff push. But that is going to do it. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. So stay happy, stay healthy. Until then, I'm out.